All right, JJ, you and I have had a lot of opportunity to talk in the past and, about mindset and getting into the right frame of mind, but this is the fun stuff now. This is where you get to talk about creating strategies that actually pay dividends in the long run. Tell me what all we're going to be talking about when you're talking about creation strategies.
Well, it's interesting that you mention it that way because a lot of times people will think that the create is the most important part of everything. And I really kind of hit on how important it is to get your mindset right and how important it is to plan your work, then work your plan. Now, in this create part, a lot of people will tell me, they'll say, all I need is more money. If I could just have more money, make more money, whatever it is, if I just had more money, all my problems would be solved. And the thing that I've found in my years of doing it myself, but also my years of working with clients who have done it longer than I've been alive, they've told me that making money in and of itself will not make you wealthy. So we've got to realize the lack of money will make you go broke. So we've got to make sure that we create some of that income because we've got to have the cash flow. That's what create is all about. Generating, and we'll talk about more the velocity of money and cash flow and how that all comes into our lives, but we've got to really focus on having that, really having access to cash. And create is one of the key strategies of generating more cash, freeing up more cash, so that then you can do what it is you need to do.
So to bring viewers up to speed, if you are talking about having the right mindset to be able to implement these creation strategies, just a little bit of a refresher. I mean, we're talking about you have to have this power of positive thinking. You have to have the willpower to want to make a change in your current financial situation. I mean, you bring everybody up to speed on what we've discussed so far.
Yeah, and you mentioned the power of positive thinking. I'm a strong advocate of the power of positive thinking. Norman Vincent Peale in his outstanding book that has just been time-tested and proven over the decades, I guess, since he wrote that book, has really had a profound impact on a lot of people. But I would almost say it's not just the power of positive thinking, because you can have the power of positive thinking and say, I think I can, I think I can. The key is, you think you can what? You've got to be able to say, I know I can do this. I know that I can accomplish this level of income. I know that I can accomplish this level of building wealth. You've got to be able to truly envision, and that's what we talked about in the previous strategies, where we focused a lot on, can you even picture yourself being wealthy? Because a lot of people, they can't do it. And unless you can picture yourself doing it, anytime we talk about these create strategies, you're going to think that that's for somebody else, but it's not for me. We've got to make sure that we believe that we can do it, because there's a saying, and we've talked about this before, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. You've got to, first of all, conceive that this is even possible to you, where it is that you want to go. We've all got self-limiting beliefs, and until you can overcome those, and I tell people, watch those strategies again. If you don't have it mastered, when we come to the create, you're not going to really believe that you can create these things, or you're going to say, okay, all I need is $1,000 a month. Well, and that may be what you need, but don't limit yourself in just thinking $1,000. I see many people being their worst enemies. If they could truly set goals for themselves, they need to stretch. By creating income, it gives you the ability to do that. But first, you've got to have the mindset.
So we've got the mindset, we've set some particular goals, we're envisioning that we can achieve or exceed some of those goals. Why is the creation strategy so much sexier than all of that other stuff?
Well, as you mentioned, it's the fun part. Because this is the part where, I got to tell you, one of the funnest things in the world is going to the bank and making a deposit. And knowing that you're not making that deposit just to make sure that that check doesn't bounce. That's what I have a lot of people that they say, well, yeah, making that deposit, that's to make sure that I've got enough funds to cover the checks that I've written, or to make sure that I've got enough to maybe pay off the credit card bills, or make that minimum payment, which is unfortunate when people get caught up in the artificial wealth trap. The funnest thing in the world is making a deposit and seeing something grow. And when you have that cash flow, that's what it takes. And that's why it's so important, is having the create function. People will say, this is the most important part. And in some ways, it's definitely one of the most important parts. But the overall wealth escape plan is made up of 6 core areas. This can be the area that we've got to have going for us, because we've got to have, to me, it's similar to, let's say, a vehicle. Your vehicle is not going to drive unless you put gas into your vehicle. Well, It's the same thing with cash flow. What I mean by create is that we've got to have that cash flow. And then when you can put some of that cash flow into your engine, your business, your personal finances, now you can continue to move forward. Just like that vehicle, that's why this is so much more fun, because people realize this is what it takes. If you don't have this, you've got nothing.
Some people are not very creative. They will describe themselves as, no, I'm not a very creative person. So how hard is it for them to get into these types of strategies? I mean, what do you have to do to kind of move them into a creative mode of thinking?
See, that's part of what we did in the envision and the strategize. But you're exactly right. Some people, they think, okay, well, now I'm ready. I've got the positive attitude, power of positive thinking. I've got all these things. I'm raring to go. Now what do I do? Well, that's why we give specific strategies on here are some things that you can do. Look around, find some ways that you can maybe free up some cash that's been improperly allocated. And by improperly allocated, I mean you spend it on stuff you shouldn't have spent it on. Mm-hmm. Well, now if we can teach you how to create more cash, maybe by selling something. How do I sell it? Who's going to buy this from me? Maybe all that people can think of is have a garage sale. I don't want to have a garage sale. Well, there are so many more strategies. We've got the internet. You can sell things on eBay. Today that frees up so much cash, and there are things that you may be able to sell something for more than you paid for it 5, 10, 15 years ago. That's the great thing about this, but you've got to know how to do it. And that's where I come in, because a lot of people, they don't have the creativity to really come up with the ideas themselves. So I've been able to I'd love to tell you that I was so creative that I came up with all these, but I didn't. There have been some very creative people that have come up with these concepts. And as an attorney working with clients, they've shown me some of the ways to do it. So now all of a sudden I have all these strategies, and people will talk to me and they say, wow, you must be so creative because you're able to come up with all these strategies. And I say, you're giving me too much credit. I didn't come up with them. What I've done is I've gone out and worked with these clients, worked with different groups, and I've said, okay, you've got the strategies. Now I've kind of put them all together where I can make them available to anyone else.
And when you talk about creative strategies, you are also talking about legal strategies, which is very important for people to understand, because you do start hearing about creative accounting and creative methods and creative lawyering at times, and it gets a lot of people in trouble. So distinguish for me the difference between creative strategies and creative strategies.
Well, it's interesting you say that, and that's part. As an attorney, I'm held to a certain standard. I can't be involved in those creative strategies that we talk about, because if I were involved in something like that, I'd lose my law license, and I worked way too hard to get that law license to ever do anything to creatively lose it. I'm not going to do that. So what we do is we focus on strategies that I have seen, and these are time-tested, proven strategies. These are things, probably the biggest critique that I get from a lot of people is that they'll say, the strategies that you teach are basic. They're just fundamental strategies. To me, when people say that, I say, thank you. I appreciate that. That to me, that is very encouraging, that these are things that have been around forever. The challenge that we have is, if it's new to somebody, it's new. And unfortunately, some of these strategies that have been around for generations, they haven't been passed down. They haven't been taught. If you think about it, are we taught ways to create income in our schools? Not at all, and that's really unfortunate. We're taught how to go out and get a job. We're not taught how to go make money. People don't teach in schools or anywhere else really how to generate more income. That's what we do. We say, okay, let me tell you, these are the things that people have been doing. This is not the theory, this is the practical nature of everything that we do. These are things that people have been doing forever. There are books out there. Challenge we have today is that there's so much information out there. In the past we had a lack of information. Now there's so much information, it becomes difficult to kind of weed through all of the stuff that's not so good and focus on what's really good. That's what it is that I do. And the reason that I'm able to do it, it's not that I've spent the hours and hours and hours, which I have, to go through all of this information. It's that I've worked with people that have spent far more hours. And when you take the cumulative knowledge, the culmination of all of this, now that's what we're able to provide to people. And that's what I provide to my clients. I provide that to my students, and they love it because of the results that they get.
And that's why we have you here today. So we're going to learn a little bit more about some of these creation strategies. Let's take a look at the first couple of strategies that you promote.
Strategy 1. Identify your current cash needs and your current sources of income.
Creating wealth involves increasing cash flow. The first step in doing that is to identify your current cash needs and your current sources of income. This can be as simple as sitting down and using some of the information that you gathered in the previous section and strategizing and using it to identify where your money comes from and, more importantly, where it goes. When you take a look at your current sources of income, then look at your current expenses, you can better identify where any potential difficulties might lie. You can also identify which of your current expenses are truly cash needs and which are just cash wants. Those cash wants may be keeping you from pulling yourself out of debt and moving toward wealth. Once you've identified all of your current sources of income and the cash needs that are truly necessary, you will be positioned to establish your cash flow equilibrium level. Getting a handle on your current position is crucial to your ability to stay on track and to escape the artificial wealth trap.
Strategy 2. Establish your cash flow equilibrium level.
In talking with people about their finances, I find that many people just don't have any real idea as to just where they stand financially. Most people think that if they're paying all their bills on time, they're okay, right? Unfortunately, this may not be the case. In fact, they may actually be sinking deeper and deeper into the artificial wealth trap. By truly studying and understanding what I refer to as your cash flow equilibrium level, you can better see just how far into the artificial wealth trap you may have fallen. Better yet, you can see how far you need to go to escape your current trap and begin building real wealth. You may be amazed at the money that you are letting slip through your fingers in pursuit of instant gratification instead of building future wealth. Knowing the cash flow that you need to satisfy your current necessities is key to good financial health. Not having this knowledge just embeds you deeper and deeper into the trap and prevents you from creating the wealth that you so richly deserve. Remember, if you want different results, you must do things differently. Knowing your cash flow equilibrium level can be a real eye-opener and can help you prioritize your spending habits. That alone is a big step towards making your escape.
Strategy 3. Develop a focused plan for your velocity of money.
The next strategy is to develop a focused plan for your velocity of money. When I refer to the velocity of money, I mean the speed at which money comes into and flows out of your life. For some of you who may be caught in, say, the artificial wealth trap, that velocity of money may seem like it travels away from you at the speed of light. Many people I talk with say that their paycheck or other income seems to be spent before it even gets to their account. And unfortunately, they're not just joking, they really mean it. People who really want to make good on their escape from the artificial wealth trap need to get a better handle on their cash flow. In fact, they need to master it. At this point, it's time to really sit down and decide on a plan to help you gain control of your velocity of money by creating more cash flow. Specifically, I mean both by creating more income streams and by making good choices on where and how you spend your money. Once you decide on your plan, follow it stringently, except to make positive changes that will help you reach your financial goals and help in your escape.
All right, JJ, let's talk about this first strategy that you talked about here, which is identifying your current cash needs and your current sources of income. Let's distinguish for me between cash needs and cash wants. Tell me what you see some people identify as cash needs and what some people identify as cash wants.
You know, I talk about this quite often. I say, if you were to say, what are the necessities in life? Typically, people would say food, clothing, and shelter. Well, when you look at that, that can be kind of a wide array of things. Food. So if that's a necessity in life, so that steak and lobster was a necessity. And I'll tell you, I've got some clients that say, absolutely, it's a necessity. If I don't have that, I can't focus. I can't function properly. Well, you know, there's a wide range. I mean, as anyone that's ever been to any restaurant, which that should be pretty much anyone, knows that there are some restaurants that are a lower priced and then some that are just exorbitantly priced. When you look at that, you've got to realize that, you know, you can't expect to continue to exist if you're spending that much money all the time going to the top, finest restaurants, the newest restaurants, the it places to go. I'm not telling people that they can't go there. Here's what I'm telling you. You can have that if you'll take the time to learn how to get the money to afford that. However, we've got to make sure that we free up the money so that we can put it into that engine to keep that engine going, so then we can go to bigger, better, more exotic places. Same thing, clothing. If we say food, clothing, and shelter, clothing, there's a difference between clothing that can be a necessity and clothing that's more of a luxury. I think we all know some of the stories that we've heard about that. Go into any store and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And seeing people, the media bombards us all the time with, you've got to have this type of clothing, because that's what all of the socialites are wearing. That's what all of the celebrities are wearing. So if you want to be cool, you've got to have those types of clothes. Well, the thing is, if you want to be broke, maybe you'll try to keep up with those celebrities, because a lot of times those celebrities may not even have paid for those clothes.
Right.
They were given to them from their sponsors. Well, that would be great to have that type of deal, but when you're keeping up, see, it used to be that we were keeping up with the Joneses. Now, we've so far surpassed the Joneses, we're keeping up with those people on television who are making millions of dollars a year, or who are portrayed as making millions of dollars a year in the sitcoms. Unfortunately, these reality shows, it's hard to distinguish reality from just pure fiction. And then that third one is, say, shelter. Okay, there's a big difference between shelter and these sprawling McMansions that people are building nowadays. And the thing is, we've had interest rates that have been very attractive, and even these adjustable rate mortgages, where people have said, okay, I can afford that. Well, maybe they can afford it based on what they think they're going to make into the future. They didn't have to come up with any money down, which I'm not saying that in and of itself is a bad strategy. The fact is, we'll talk about that strategy.
Yep.
But when you look at it, the thing is, we've got to make sure that we don't buy into this artificial wealth trap. And that's what people have done, is that they've said, okay, I can afford this. Well, then their mortgage gets readjusted, and then they get readjusted into different types of housing. So we've got to make sure that we can avoid that. When you're talking about those cash needs, you've got to be reasonable and say, okay, based upon your current sources of income, what is it that you can afford? Those are certain needs, food, clothing, and shelter, but you've got to make sure that you can go either into the spectrum on those things. Make sure that you distinguish what is really necessary from what is really something that you want. And once again, I'm all for setting your goals very high. I mean, I run my life a lot of times by motivation through obligation, where I might bite off more than I can chew, just because that's how I stretch myself. That's how I know what I'm capable of, is by setting loftier goals for myself.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is that when your daughter is asking you for those $200 pair of jeans and those $100 T-shirts, which I have actually seen before, you're probably saying we're going to come up with a little bit better alternative than that.
I'm saying that doesn't fall within the needs category. That's right.
Also, let's talk about the cash flow equilibrium level. It's kind of a hard concept. It's kind of a hard phrase for me to say. So, I mean, give me the definition of that. I mean, and maybe a more layman's term of what you mean by cash flow equilibrium level.
Yeah. It's hard to say, isn't it? I mean, when you look at that, that's something that I came up with. That's not anything you're ever going to find in any sort of finance book, personal finance, any sort of material you'll see out there, because I just kind of came up with that myself, this cash flow equilibrium level. And it's essentially, I hate to say it's a budget, because I don't know that budgets work. To me, I think it's like diets. You know, that the diets, a lot of times people find that it's too hard to really stick to this diet. As such, they don't get the results that they wanted to get, and then they're discouraged, and which once they're discouraged, then they just go eat more, or they don't want to exercise, and then it's just almost a compounding effect. Well, it's the same thing with budgeting. People will budget, and then something will come up, and they say, oh, well, I couldn't stick to that budget. Well, I'm not saying that you've got to have that specific thing that by no means do you ever spend. You know, I'll go into stores sometimes, or if I'm looking to make a new purchase, people will say, well, how much do you want to spend? So, well, I don't know. It all depends, because I know myself how much I feel comfortable spending, but if you tell me that there's a Rolls Royce available for $50,000, maybe I'm not planning on spending $50,000, but if that Rolls Royce was available, as long as it fits within my overall equilibrium level, it's not going to throw me off balance. That's the key to the equilibrium level, is if you're walking along, if something throws you off balance, you may fall down. It's going to trip you up. It's going to cause you, once you fall down, you may hurt yourself. That's exactly what happens with our finances, because our equilibrium gets off. You've got to make sure that you've kind of got things balanced. And that's why when I say it ties into a budget, I'll use that term balance. most people have no idea what their balance is.
Well, that leads me to my next question. I mean, when you walk through some of the principles of establishing this with people, what kind of surprise comes over some of these people when they go, my gosh, I had no idea I spent that much of my money on this and this much of my money on that, or that I could alter my behavior a little bit and come up with this type of result?
I say the biggest surprises that I see are when people sit down and they see how much money they spent, or how much money what they spent. Because let's say that latte. You know, I've read one book that talks about the latte factor. Well, I kind of like that whole fact of saying, you know, people say they don't have an extra $5. They don't have this, but then you say, okay, but you have 3 or 4 lattes a day, each one of those that cost $3 or $4. Well, you start adding that up. Here's what really surprises people is when I say, okay, let's see how much that would add up to in a week. And I say, okay, now let's kind of take it a little further. How much would that add up to in a month? Now let's see how much that adds up to in a year. And sometimes I say, okay, that's a decent surprise. But then where they're really surprised, I say, but what if you had set that money aside, put it into an account, and invested that even at 5%, which 5% is not our optimal return, but even at 5%, because if I said 10%, people say, I don't believe that. But even at 5%, I show them, here's what that money would have done for you even in 1 year's time. But the biggest surprise is when I say, here's what that would do in 10 years. Here's what that would do at the time of your retirement. Pretty soon they find out that that latte was costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost retirement funds. I'm not beating up on Starbucks or any of the other groups. I like my lattes. I like to go to Starbucks. I like to get me a chai tea latte or something. But the key is I've got to make sure that I understand what it cost me. That's where people get tripped up. That's where they kind of get off their cash flow equilibrium level. It's because they're kicked off balance. They don't realize how much of their money is going there. If they'd simply do a few slight things to change things just a little bit, it can make a huge, enormous difference.
Sometimes we see this ability to save or this ability to change behavior. It's different between different generations. My parents, for instance, were children of parents from the Depression, and my kids are going to have benefited from a very prolific and profitable time in the American economy. And so instilling some of those attitudes, it's hard to do. I mean, I have in-laws who still save the aluminum foil in their plastic bags, because they grew up in a rural community, in the southern United States. And so it's second nature to them to save like that, whereas we would never think about doing that. I mean, how much of that generational type difference do you see in the clients that you work with?
It's huge. It really is. Because I do see that quite a bit. Because if you look back at statistics, I think I was reading somewhere where it said in the 1940s or 1950s, and forgive me if these aren't exact, but the average size of a home was 732 square feet. And then I believe it said in the 60s it bumped up to 932. Well, today I think the average size home, they say, is about 2,200 square feet. And if you look at that, you compare that to the 40s and 50s, and you say, our families were bigger back then than they are now, but we needed less overall space in which to live. Well, then garages. Garages have gone from having no garage to a single car to a double car. Now it's not uncommon to see 3 and even 4-car garages. Why? Because we've got more stuff. Well, it's the same type, that mindset sometimes that it was not passed down, or it said, you know what, I grew up in this almost of a scarcity situation. My goal in life is to make sure that I don't have to live like that, and that my kids won't have to live like I had to live. Well, there are pros and cons on that, because some ways we may wish that our kids could live like we lived, but there are some aspects of it that we say, no, I don't want them to have to go without. There's a fine line, and that kind of ties into the equilibrium level as well. There's a fine line between saying, okay, I don't want them to have to go without. There's a different mindset between patching your genes and getting new genes. Well, there's that balance that you've got to factor in, and every person's going to have a little bit different one. When you look at the generations, I definitely see that, because the older clients, they remember what it's like to suffer. Some of the younger clients that will come in, I have 20-somethings that will come into my office, and they're making huge salaries. I've had clients that have made money from playing video games. That's what's crazy. Clients that have made good money playing video games, and they don't know what it's like to have to go out there and get a job. They don't know what it's like to have to manage their money. All of a sudden, a downturn in the economy comes, and they're freaking out because they've never seen it. That's where some of the, maybe my more mature clients have been out there. They've seen things. They're more seasoned. They know what can happen, and they've prepared themselves because they don't want to get caught in what they were caught in before. When they try to explain it to the younger generation says, yeah, that was your time. That doesn't apply to me. Well, they find out that it applies to everyone.
Yeah, these principles are time tested, as you like to say. You also talk about developing a focus plan for the velocity of money, as you call it. And I guess that's the speed at which it comes into your hands and the speed at which it comes out of your pocket, I suppose. What's the fastest, or give me a worst case scenario of a client that you've worked with where you're like, wow, I cannot believe that they're that undisciplined.
Well, I'll give you kind of a situation that I encounter quite often. It has to do with real estate. You know, especially in a market where real estate is just going through the roof. You'll have people that may make money on deals that they never owned anything. They basically got it under contract, assigned it over, and then made good money just flipping that property without ever owning it. So, I mean, you talk about a super quick flip. Now it's not buying it, fixing up, and selling it. It's just buying it, getting it under contract, and then flipping that contract. Well, they make instant money, and then they start thinking that I'll always make this money. Unfortunately, the types of deals that they get involved with, maybe they were great right here, and so they got geared to a certain lifestyle. They got geared to money coming in so quickly that they couldn't even spend it fast enough. Unfortunately, things start slowing down. Then they say, ooh, I got my outflow geared to my inflow. Now that the inflow slows, they've got fixed expenses. And see, that's a big difference too. There's a difference between a fixed expense and an expense that may have been a one-time expense. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, people will say, why on earth would I ever tie my money up in buying the car when I could just lease that car? I mean, a $1,000 or a $1,200 a month lease payment, which I know that may sound high to a lot of people, and it should, but that's not uncommon at all. I've had clients that seems like a very small lease payment because they said, well, I'm making this much money. That's a pittance. Well, turns out that when that dries up, all of a sudden, those lease payments don't stop. They've got to continue. So it's that fixed expense. And that's part of the velocity of money, is understanding that you've got to factor in how it comes in, also in determining how it goes out. Because if you get everything geared to how it's coming in, my clients who are salespeople, they understand this because they have learned it in the school of hard knocks. They've gone out there and they said, wow, I made this big sale, now I can go spend it. Unfortunately, they didn't have that next big sale. Same thing with the real estate deal. Maybe you put together this huge real estate deal and you say, that was easy, that only took me 1 month. If I do one of these a month, maybe I made $50,000, that's $600,000 a year, great. For me to go spend this money, that's nothing. Or even if they said, you know, I made $5,000 on that real estate deal, maybe I can do that once a month. There's $60,000. I can easily adapt to this particular lifestyle. Things get kind of tight. All of a sudden there's a downturn in the economy. They get stuck with a real estate deal. They didn't factor that in. Now they're not making $5,000. They may even lose $5,000. Challenge is they spent the $5,000 they made last month. It's gone. So where are they going to get this new $5,000? So they're one deal away from going bankrupt. They may say that maybe I'm not living paycheck to paycheck, but they're living real estate deal to real estate deal. And if they're not putting those deals together, they lose it all. That's where the velocity of money comes in. You've got to make sure you understand how it's coming in and how it's going out. Most people just simply don't get that, and there's good reason. They've never been taught.
But you can deal with somebody in that situation and help them come up with a game plan, a creation strategy to control that.
We do it all the time.
All right, let's take a look at a couple of more of these creation strategies that you've got, and we will come back and ask a few more in-depth questions on that.
Strategy 4. When bills loom larger than available cash, use offensive, not defensive strategies.
In financial situations and in most areas of life, you want to be proactive rather than reactive. But when there is more debt than money, most people want to hide, to shut down, and to cut back on everything. This is a defensive strategy. This is exactly the opposite of what you need to do when you're faced with this situation. You need to be proactive. You need to go on the offensive in this type of situation. You may have heard the saying that you have to spend money to make money. That saying is at least partially true. My caveat here is that you need to spend money in such a way that will bring some sort of positive return. If that spending is not a necessity to your lifestyle and it won't benefit you financially, you need to re-examine that spending habit. Offensive strategies involve healthy spending that really amounts to investing in yourself and in your future wealth. By spending your money wisely, you are being offensive. When you employ the proper spending habits, you are increasing your velocity of money. By doing so properly, you can turn what once was a disadvantage into an advantage. The key is to make the first move and to take control instead of being controlled.
Strategy 5. Reduce your expenses to increase your resources.
In order to reduce your debt, you need the cash with which to pay it off. To get the cash, you need to increase your cash flow. Earlier, you looked at your income sources. One of those income sources was to moderate your spending habits to increase your cash flow equilibrium level. There are dozens of strategies that you can use to instantly increase your cash flow by freeing up wrongly allocated expenditures. If applied properly, you could easily free up at least $100 per week. That $100 per week is more than $400 per month in extra cash. Even more amazing, that is $5,200 in extra cash over the course of a year. As the effects of your new strategies kick in, you'll be able to easily see how there is free money to be found in having this knowledge. Realize that the most powerful thing in this strategy is that this $100 a week increase in cash flow comes from found money, not from your paycheck going up. You are not working harder or taking on another job. You're working smarter with the income you currently generate. Sound like magic? Well, you'll soon learn that proper planning works just like magic.
Strategy 6. Stop making interest-free loans.
Another very important wealth creation strategy is to stop making interest-free loans. Now, you may say, wait just a minute, has he lost his mind? Of course I don't make interest-free loans. Is he crazy? But your actions may tell me otherwise. Having too much money withheld from your paycheck for income tax is exactly that, an interest-free loan made to the government. That puts a whole new perspective on your withholdings, doesn't it? There is a simple solution to reduce or even eliminate this interest-free loan. You need to add an additional allowance or allowances to your W-4. What's even better is, as you work to create new tax deductions or qualify for additional tax credits, you don't have to wait until next year to receive the accompanying refund. That's right, get your refund now instead of waiting until you file your tax return next year. Simply by adding one extra allowance to your W-4 form for every $3,400 you have in current or new deductions will literally allow you to receive your extra refund now instead of later. Even better, you will stop making an interest-free loan to the government and start putting that money to work for you.
All right, JJ, let's pick up with a couple more of these creation strategies that you're talking about here. You're talking about, in one of these strategies, going on the offensive instead of playing defense all the time. In some respects, that seems a little counterintuitive if you are trying to control expenses. So maybe help me understand that a little bit better.
Well, really, a lot of what I've learned is come from other people. And as an attorney working with people on wealth preservation, I mean, I've worked with them on paying less in taxes, on protecting their assets, on planning their estates. So I work with people that have, pretty good amount of money. They've built wealth over their lifetimes. And that's where I've learned these strategies, is in working with these people. They've taught these strategies to me. And one thing that I've found is that they think and they act much differently than do other people. And part of that is when, as the strategy says, when bills loom larger than available cash, use offensive, not defensive strategies. Well, most of these wealthy people, they look at downturns as buying opportunities. When everything was going up, 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 they didn't want to go out there and buy anything because they say, hey, what goes up must come down. Right. So they looked at it and they said, okay, I'm going to wait till all of this stuff starts coming down. Now, that's going to be when I go out there and pick things up. So when everybody else is panicking, freaking out, worrying about that the sky's falling, the world's coming to an end, they're saying, things are looking good. And now it's where I'm going to be buying things. And that may sound strange, and I'll tell you, there are some people that look out there and say, yeah, they're basically taking advantage of people, kicking them while they're down. Not at all. Because as the bottom starts coming into play, they come in and say, you weren't able to sell your house. I'm here freeing it up. And that's one of the biggest misnomers that I see, is that people start thinking that, okay, well, the rich take advantage of other people. That's not necessarily the case at all. The rich see opportunities. The greatest part of all of this is that everyone can do the exact same thing. See, I worked with a guy years ago, and he said, it's very simple. If you want to be rich, look at rich people, see what they do, and then look at poor people and see what they do. Do what the rich people do, don't do what the poor people do. I said, well, that may be a little simplistic, but you can learn something from that. There is some wisdom in that statement. What the wealthy are doing is that they say, okay, now it's time to pull ourselves up from the bootstraps. Let's start going, moving forward instead of retreating. That's what the majority of people do, is they retreat and they worry, they get into their shell, they start thinking, okay, I've got to start really scaling back. When the reality is they need to take charge and start moving forward.
Well, you've given me a little bit of an example of this theory of turning a disadvantage into an advantage. What are some other things that you've seen where people have, again, taken what looks like a lack of opportunity and turned it into opportunity?
Well, I've seen people that instead of scaling back, and I've done it in my own business, where there were times that I said, you know what, if I scale things back, I can't hold another event. Well, if I don't hold another event, I'm not going to generate any income. So what happens is, if things get tight, you say, you know what, I need to see what it is my clients want, and then I need to develop a service to meet that need, maybe a product to meet that need. I've had a lot of people say, we really need help with this particular aspect of our finances. Who do you know that you could refer us to, that could offer that for us? I said, well, that's something I could do for you. And they said, really? I'd love to do that. Well, at a time where maybe cash flow wasn't the greatest, now I've got to kind of ramp up efforts and say, now I've got to pour more money into something that I can begin offering. Maybe open a new line of business, a new line of services, products that I can then offer. And it's a little scary.
Well, you're taking a risk is what you're doing.
That's right.
And so it may not pan out.
Right, and you're saying, okay, now it costs this much money. However, if you know that it's something that's going to benefit people, you know that it's something that people need, and I look at it, basically everything that I've done has been in direct response to what my clients and my customers have asked me to create. And to me, I say, if they've said this is what they need, it's a pretty safe bet. So now I've calculated that risk. And that's huge. I mean, anybody listening to this, watching this right now needs to know, write that down. There is a big difference between risk and calculated risk. When I go out there and ask my clients what it is that they need, what it is that they want from me, then I create it. Now I'm responding to demand.
Have you had your fair share of failures?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I mean, there are times that it's funny, because I'll talk to some people and they say, wow, it must be great to be you. I mean, it seems like everything you touch turns to gold. And then I'll have some people that may see some of the not so successful ventures and they say, wow, that must be tough to be you. I mean, you've had so many different failures. And I say, hey, the way I look at it is Thomas Edison said, I didn't learn 1,000 or 10,000 ways, I think it may have been, to fail. When he was trying to create the light bulb, he said, essentially, I've learned 10,000 ways that didn't work. That's great. Now I can focus on those things that do work. And that's the way I have to look at it. And by studying the lives of people like this that were extraordinarily successful people, I can learn things. It changes my mindset. When I change my mindset, all of a sudden, what I find is that it changes my outer world. My inner world changes my outer world.
All right, a technique that is pretty tried and true is that you reduce your expenses to increase your resources as well. I mean, we see this in corporations all the time. They may downsize. Small businesses may say, look, I've got to, not spend as much on advertising or do these different things. I've got to find some ways to save some money and bring a little bit more to the bottom line. This is another one of the strategies, and there is a time and a place for this.
Right, because see, I'll use maybe insurance. I've seen people that times got tough and they said, well, you know what, I've been living pretty well. I haven't been sick. I haven't had any catastrophic damages, any illnesses, anything. Maybe I'll just cancel my insurance. So what do you mean cancel your insurance? The whole reason that you have insurance is in case that happens. Well, what we can do, here's the way you tweak it. Rather than reduce or eliminating your insurance, why don't you reduce the premium in that insurance? Go find a better overall coverage. Find a better premium. If you start looking at this, maybe raise your deductible. That's what most people have, too small of a deductible. That on that deductible, you could be self-insured. Raise your deductible, and once you do that, that's going to lower your premium. Well, now take the money that you've saved in that lowered premium, put it in an account. As a lawyer, one of the things that we have to do is we have trust accounts. Well, if you would kind of set up, not necessarily a trust account, but set up a separate account that is your emergency fund, and realize don't touch it. Just like a lawyer with their trust account, you can't touch that money. It's the same way for us as individuals. And that's what I share with people, say, why don't you operate things the way that a lawyer would? If you realize that now I can't touch that, take that savings from the premium, put it into an investment account. Now invest that money. Same way with your life insurance. Any of the difference that you may have been paying for too much life insurance or a certain type of insurance, take the difference maybe between, let's say, whole life and term. Take the difference on what you would have spent for that whole life, and then you can put it into an investment account by buying term.
Some of these things that you're talking about are really just the difference between saving $50, $75, $100 a week. Does that really make a big difference?
That's what's so great about this, is that I'm not talking about saving $2,500 here, $5,000 here, $10,000. There are people that can do that. But what the great thing about it is, even with $50, think about this. If you had set that up, $50 when you first started your career, whether you started right out of high school at, say, at age 18, or maybe you went to college and you started maybe when you were 22, 23, or maybe you were on the delayed plan. You didn't start till you were 25, 26 years old. Wherever you are, think back, wouldn't you have liked to have set aside $50, and especially compounding? The miracle of compounding growth is Albert Einstein refers to it as the most powerful force in the universe. It's incredible. The key is you've got to keep setting that money, even if it's $1. $1, if you doubled that dollar 20 times, at the end of the 20th time, you would end up with $1,048,576. That a little bit goes a long way.
All right, another strategy that you've advocated is to basically bump up your withholdings on your paycheck. And so what happens if maybe you don't get that right? What happens if you're not exact about that, and at the end of the year you wind up owing more in taxes somehow because you've just not calculated or planned properly?
Well, one thing, as you know, Roby, I've made a living off of helping people with tax planning for over a decade. So one of the things that I always tell people is check with your tax professional about this and run it by them. We help people all the time do this specific strategy. We say, listen, here's the deal. You're making an interest-free loan to the government. Basically, you're paying more in. And most people look at this, they say, wow, that means I'll just get the money back when it comes tax time. The challenge is they realize that that's the money they're getting. They use it as a bonus. If you just never paid that money in, and as you mentioned, you've got to do it correctly, because you definitely don't want to mess up in this area. That's why I always say check with your tax advisor. If you don't have a tax advisor, we'd love to help you. We can give you that type of assistance. We've helped thousands of people over the years. We've helped them with this, and it's helped them to generate millions of dollars.
All right, you've got other tax strategies. You've got other strategies for creating wealth. I want to get to a few more of those. I want to learn a little bit more about those.
Strategy 7. To increase cash flow, get down to business.
One thing I always tell people is to treat their finances like a business. This will help you to be more objective in your decision making. It will help you to increase your cash flow while learning to adjust your spending to focus more on the things that will help you make more money. I refer to this adjusted spending plan as making calculated expenses. Businesses do this every day. A successful business is one that watches its baseline, its cash flow equilibrium, and calculates how to use its available cash in ways that will help it continue to succeed. You can do the same thing by really getting down to business. Getting down to business means you need to start a home-based business. This can enable you to take advantage of many cash flow benefits, such as deductions. What kind of business? Well, that's up to you. The point is to find something that fits your interest, fits your financial budget, fits your available time, and fits the amount of risk that you're willing to take. Think about this process as the business of you becoming wealthy.
Strategy 8. Reduce your tax expenses by not making it personal.
We've spoken about the importance of starting your own home-based businesses and the many financial advantages it can bring. Properly implementing this strategy can give you a pay raise by literally saving you thousands of tax dollars each and every year. The U.S. government has established hundreds of pages of tax code that give tax advantages to businesses. Businesses are given preferential treatment under our tax code. While personal tax deductions and credits are being reduced or eliminated, Congress is continually adding additional tax breaks for businesses to stimulate the economy. Businesses' bottom line, their cash flow equilibrium level, is raised significantly by these breaks. Individuals, meaning you, cannot take advantage of these same savings. So to reap the tax dollar benefits provided by the government, you must become a business. Our point here is to provide for more capital through a reduced tax obligation. There are hundreds of business tax savings that your home business can implement. The key is you've got to have a business to make that happen.
Strategy 9. Use the internet to provide fuel for your engine.
Our creation strategies focus on freeing up cash and/or building additional cash flow. Selling an item, service, or information is a relatively quick way to produce quick cash. If you have a product or information that you believe is the next big thing, or a painting that could be by a master up in your attic, the question is, how do you turn this dead weight into cash? In the age before the internet, that could have involved setting up a booth at a trade fair or a flea market, having a garage sale, or even visiting a pawn shop or local auction house. The problem with those options is that you can only reach a relatively small target market. The bottom line is the more potential customers you can reach, the higher your potential sales numbers, and very often, the higher the price. The internet has become a powerful marketing and sales tool. Online selling, be it classifieds or auction sites, gives a huge marketing base to the seller with relatively little expense. If you don't have a product or service to market, invent one. What I mean by that is to look around at your stuff. What do you have that is just collecting dust or taking up space? Old technology, collectibles, retro items, even clothes can be turned into quick cash by taking advantage of online auctions. If you don't have a lot of stuff to sell, create a business that can offer the service of online selling for others who may not have the time or the computer savvy to do so. With all the options out there, there is no excuse for not taking advantage of one of the online tools to put quick cash in your pocket.
All right, strategy number 7, to increase cash flow, you got to get down to business. You got to do what you call calculated expenses. Calculated expenses, this is a J.J. Childers term here. What are calculated expenses?
Well, similar to what we talked about earlier, where I say a calculated expense is I'm not just throwing money out the window. If I treat everything like a business, businesses look at every dollar they spend. They say, okay, if I'm going to allot a certain amount toward advertising, I need to think, how much is that going to produce in revenue? If I'm going to put so much towards my marketing budget, how much can I reasonably anticipate bringing back in? You see, they go into the expenditure knowing if I place this ad in the paper, in a magazine, or on television, or on the radio, what can I reasonably anticipate receiving in exchange for that? From that standpoint, I look at it a lot of times, I say, I want to be writing big checks. Because if I knew that every dollar I spent on the radio advertising is going to produce $5 in added revenue, how much do I want to spend? I want to spend as much as I can, because if I know that I'm getting a return on that investment. And see, that's a difference. It's an investment. A calculated expense is basically an investment in future revenue. Most people operate their personal situation as an individual. You've got to change that mindset and start acting like a business. They make calculated expenses, you need to do the same thing.
Well, you've also advocated that you might look at starting a business in some respects to increase this cash flow. But what if you don't have the money to do the startup?
See, that's the great part of it. We teach you literally hundreds of business ideas that you can implement with none of your own money. See, that's the best kind. The kind that don't take any of your own money, and I don't even say you should take a look at it, I say you should do it. I mean, I firmly believe everybody needs to have their own business of some type. Doesn't need to be their sole means of generating income, but they need to have at least some type of business, because I think people will say you need to have a hobby. I don't want to have any hobbies. All of my hobbies, I'll turn them into businesses. Now I can generate that into an income producing activity, and at the same time I get great tax deductions and tax breaks, tax benefits by doing so.
Well, speaking of tax breaks, tax deductions, tax benefits, you've referenced in these strategies that this is an ever-changing kind of area of the tax code. I mean, every year there are new state and federal tax laws that come into existence. How do you keep up with all of that stuff? I mean, how do people stay on top of that to know what can benefit them?
The great news is that they don't have to. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have to make sure they comply with all the laws. But see, one of the greatest concepts, and I've learned this by studying some of the wealthiest people in the world. And when I say that, it's not that I know them personally, it's not that they're my clients, it's that I've read about them. I've read stories, I've read illustrations, biographies on what it is that they did. And what I have found is that they have certain characteristics. They all follow certain methods. One of those methods is to surround themselves with what's known as a mastermind team. And that mastermind team is made up of professionals that can stay on top of the laws for you. So you don't have to do it, you just have to make sure that you're working with the right people. And here's the thing, sometimes people say, well, I can't afford them. I say you can't afford not to use those people, because those people can save you far more than they'll ever cost you. The key is surround yourself and build that mastermind team.
All right, in one of your strategies, you talk about letting the powerful internet become a great tool for you to develop your own business, to generate new areas of income for you. You talked about things that might be lying around your house. Great example, cash in the attic, if you want to call it, cash in the basement. What if you don't have a bunch of stuff laying around? What if you're a frugal person, you're an austere person, you don't have a lot of stuff like that? Can you sell a service over the internet? Can you do other things like that?
You can definitely sell a service. Now, here's one of the things that I've seen some people do. They'll go into a thrift store, maybe Goodwill or Savers or Salvation Army thrift store, whatever they may find. They may have just a privately owned thrift store in their community, and you can find some real treasures in these stores. And they'll go in there, sometimes they'll find them for themselves to use personally, but sometimes they'll find something, they'll say, wow, this store doesn't know what they have. I'll tell you, one time I was actually in a store. I was in there trying to find some retro clothing for an 80s party. And I was in there, and all of a sudden I came across a Mountain Hardwear jacket, which I don't know if people know what a Mountain Hardwear jacket is, but basically this was a very nice upscale brand of outerwear clothing for maybe going mountain climbing, being in extreme cold weather. Taped seams on the interior, everything. Great jacket, $8. Well, the thing is, if you look on eBay, those same jackets may be going for $50, $60, $70, $100. Well, think about that. You go and you buy a jacket like that for $8. Let's say you sold it at the low end for $50 on eBay. Now you've made some money right there. Maybe you didn't have the stuff, but you knew where to go get the stuff. Mm-hmm. The key is go through eBay, find out what's selling, and then go to those thrift stores, see if you can find any of those things. Now you become almost kind of like a retailer. You went and you bought it wholesale at the thrift store, and you sold it retail on eBay. That's one of the things you can do with those goods and basically things if you don't have anything. And I've seen many people that do that. Well, services, there are all kinds of things that people are willing to pay for if you will do the service for them. Some things maybe I'd just like to learn a little bit more about this particular topic, this particular area. You can do that, but the key is you've just got to make sure that you put something together that has value to people, and then you can market it over the internet.
That's a great idea. Those are some great strategies. We still got a little bit more to get to. I want to tap your brain on those when we come back.
Strategy 10. Generate income on the internet while you're doing something else.
I'm sure you're familiar with the term multitasking. Simply put, it means that you are able to accomplish multiple tasks all at the same time. This can be a very bad approach if you're trying to read your morning paper while driving your car to work. At the same time, it can enable you to be extraordinarily productive if you can maximize your time by doubling your efforts. One area that is very conducive to multitasking is to utilize the power of the internet to leverage your marketing efforts. The internet is one venue where you can truly set it and forget it. This means that you can establish a one-time marketing and product sales campaign that can help you to make money even while you sleep. The key is that you've got to learn how to do it. Once you do that, you've got a business that you can operate for the rest of your life. Through the use of automated procedures such as an internet shopping cart to facilitate sales, a series of autoresponders to follow up with customers, and mechanisms for handling customer service, your business can generate income for you with you not having to be there. This is the best possible scenario because it frees you up to do other things without losing out on generating internet income.
Strategy 11. Before you invest in real estate, let real estate invest in you.
In recent years, more people have become interested in investing in real estate than ever before. People are looking for a way to increase their income and build long-term wealth, and they recognize that real estate can be a great way to do this. Unfortunately, they all too often get started without properly preparing themselves. One of the pieces of advice that I give people is to let real estate invest in you before you invest any of your hard-earned money in real estate. Simply put, this means that you need to take advantage of strategies in real estate that can put money in your pocket without you having to put any of your money at risk. There are indeed ways to do this if you will take the time to find out what these strategies are and how you can implement them. In the stock market, many would-be traders begin their training by doing simulated or paper trades. The benefit to this is that you can practice your skills before you risk losing any of your actual money. The downside is that any gains that you make are on paper only, and you don't make any of that money. With real estate, we can apply the same concepts, but turn it into real cash by learning the art of contract assignments. This enables you to practice your skills and still make money.
Strategy 12. Recognize the role of cash flow and continue to build multiple sources of income.
Once you've taken the time to understand the importance of a properly flowing cash flow machine, it's time to analyze your existing situation and look for ways to expand. One way to do this is to conduct a monthly assessment of your cash flow, your equilibrium level, and your personal velocity of money measurements. Hopefully you've been doing some sort of record keeping and charting of this to measure it. If not, you need to start. When you take the time to assess these creation strategies, you will gain a greater recognition of their importance. Additionally, you'll find yourself much more motivated to look for newer, bigger, and better ways to increase your cash flow. This can take the form of increasing your existing sources of capital or in identifying potential new sources. It's been my experience that once you really get the hang of it, you'll end up doing both. The most important part of the wealth creation process is to begin focusing on the process itself. By doing this, your mind will become a greater asset to you than you ever could possibly imagine.
All right, JJ, one of the things you're talking about is, generating some of this income from the internet here. And in my experience, I've seen that you can spend a lot of money on a website. You can spend a lot of money on some of the behind the scenes stuff that goes on with all of that. You can also spend next to nothing, spend free. It's free sometimes, but sometimes that stuff looks cheap. So how do you kind of guard against, doing something first class and making it look like a very nice finished product versus doing something that you might not be too proud of?
Well, and that's a great question, because one of the things that I do quite a bit as an attorney is I work with a lot of the world's top internet marketers. And one of the things that they've taught me, as well as taught thousands of other people, is how to do things as effectively and efficiently as possible. My brother's an internet marketer, and one of the things that he does is he'll outsource a lot of the things that he does. People will write programs for him. He'll have coders that can do different things. He'll outsource it overseas, and the thing is, he's never been overseas to meet these particular people. He'll do it all over the internet. Well, he'll write up the specifications. Here's what I need done, and he'll outsource it to them. I know a lot of times that gets a bad rap by kind of things being outsourced overseas, but when it's your business and you look at it and you say, now you're able to get top quality work done for a fraction, and I mean a fraction of the overall cost, this can be truly beneficial. The other thing that the internet marketers have taught me is something that I then teach my clients, and that is the best and most cost-effective way to put some of these things together. How to get a domain name for the lowest possible price. How to be able to have your hosting done for the lowest possible price. How to get templates. See, templates are basically essentially models that people have drawn up for you. You can get these things for $10, $20, very little, very low amounts that you're having to spend to make sure that you have something that may be outstanding, very top-notch. On top of everything, you're able to do this in a way that's very cost-effective.
All right, JJ, another area that you stress some attention in is in real estate. I think that you say before you invest in real estate, let real estate invest in you. A bit of a cliche for me to interpret that at this point in time, so maybe explain to me in detail what you mean by that.
Well, it's so funny because people always say, let real estate invest in me. Okay, I'll let it invest in me. I'm sitting back waiting for that to happen. What I mean by that is you can go out and do essentially practice deals. Now that may sound strange, but a lot of people do that in the stock market where they'll say, okay, let me see, here's what I would have paid for this stock. Let me presume I held on to it till today. Here's what I would have sold it for. And then based on watching the movement of the market, you can see I would have made money or I would have lost money. It's very easy to measure. Real estate is not that simple to do. Well, there are ways that you can maximize this strategy even in real estate. The very first real estate deal that I ever did on my own was one, and I say on my own because I was involved in a lot of real estate deals with my dad, who was a real estate investor, and is a real estate investor and developer. Well, this first one I did on my own, basically I went through all the motions. I went out, I found the property, I got the property under contract. And see, I'd made sure that I wrote the buyer's name was my name and/or assigns, which means I had the right to assign my interest over. Well, I talked to my dad about this deal, and he said, hey, that sounds great. Our arrangement was that I would do the work, he'd put up the money. Well, all of a sudden he said, I've decided I'm not going to put up the money. So what do you mean you're not going to put up the money? That was how I put this deal together. What he taught me was that he eliminated the barriers that I may have set for myself mentally. Because having the knowledge that I had someone behind me, now I said, okay, well then I feel fine putting this deal together. I've got the money. Well, then when he took the money away, it forced me to be creative. And he said, now why did you put and/or assigns? I said, so that I could assign my interest in that contract over. Well, what happened was I didn't have the first dollar in that deal. Actually, I did. I had $1 for my earnest money deposit. $1 for the earnest money. And then I basically said, okay, let me assign my contract over. I assigned my contract to a gentleman for $1,000. Now that may not sound like an extraordinary amount of money, but at the time, at my age, and when I was in college, $1,000 meant a lot of money to me. So all of a sudden, now I was able to, by doing a deal without any of my own money, and really not even doing the deal, I just put the deal together. That's how real estate was able to invest in me, by letting me practice the strategies, seeing that the strategies work, then assign that deal to somebody else.
You basically got $1,000 for some transaction is what you got.
That's right. And see, that's the type of thing. There are people out there, they'll pay top money for somebody to be what they call their bird dogs. I work with real estate investors all the time as their attorney, and they'll tell me how they structure the deals, and then I'm able to take that knowledge, utilize it myself. They pay these bird dogs to go out there, find the deals for them.
All right, JJ, one of the last things that you said in one of your strategies here, and I want to read this a little bit verbatim here, is that it's been your experience that once you get the hang of developing these multiple sources of income, these multiple streams of income, you'll end up doing a lot more of it, is the essence of what you've said there. So, I mean, what have you seen in your experience that convinces you that that's how people are going to react once they start practicing what you preach?
Well, really, what I've seen in my clients and even in myself, which is probably more telling, is that what I was really referring to is that people will do both. They'll look to cut their expenses, and they'll also, at the same time, look to bring in more money. Well, see, that's where essentially, that's the true distinction between people that ever really make a lot of money and those people that do, I'd say, have moderate success. The ones that really kick it into overdrive are the ones that take both approaches, because while they're lowering their expenses, they're increasing their income. So all of a sudden, if you think about that, the gap, first of all, as they're building wealth, wealth is really your equity between what the overall value of your assets and the amount of your liabilities. So as they lower their liabilities, their expenses, they're increasing their income and their assets. So as this gap moves wider, all of a sudden their wealth is built up. And see, that's where, as I mentioned earlier, talking about how exciting it is. How exciting to see that amount grow and to see as your expense, pretty soon it becomes almost a challenge. Can I find the best possible deal on this? Okay, the better a deal I can find, the more money that frees up. And then at the same time, the more money I'm able to make, the more it puts into my bank account. It causes this gap to continue to grow bigger and bigger all the time. That's where the fun comes in.
All right, and this has been fun because these are the creation strategies that we talked about. But as you said, you still got to have the mindset, you got to have the willpower, you got to have the game plan in place to start even working on these creation strategies. This has been good stuff. JJ, thanks.
Thank you.